I still remember that night as if it's carved into my bones. The table was set, the plates half full, but no one touched their food. The clinking of a single spoon against porcelain echoed in the silence, each sound sharp as a knife. My wife's eyes were lowered, staring at her plate as if looking at me might break her. My son, though. My son didn't look away. His eyes, red and wet, held mine across the table, and in them I saw everything: anger, sadness, fear, but also something else. On the table between us lay the final piece of paper, the last payment receipt. The debt, that monstrous shadow hanging over us for years, was finally gone. I thought the moment would feel like victory. I thought we'd cheer, laugh, maybe even cry tears of joy. But instead there was only silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. My hands trembled as I pressed the paper flat, staring at the numbers, the stamp, the proof. My chest should have been swelling with pride, but all I felt was exhaustion, a hollowness that reached deeper than bone. I had given everything to erase that number, and in the process, I almost erased myself. I remembered the calls, the shame of hearing my name shouted across family gatherings, the whispers behind my back. I remembered the slammed doors, the nights alone at the kitchen table, drowning in bills while my wife slept with her back turned. I remembered missing birthdays, skipping anniversaries, trading memories for overtime shifts. And then his voice broke through it all. "Dad," my son said softly, "I don't need you to be a hero. I just need you here." Those words hit me harder than any debt collector, harder than any insult or humiliation. For years I thought strength meant carrying everything alone. I thought love was sacrifice no matter the cost. But sitting there staring into my boy's tear-filled eyes, I realized I'd been wrong. Strength wasn't about how much I could carry. It was about what I refused to let go of, and love. Love wasn't giving everything away. It was staying present, even when the weight tried to crush you. That night I looked at my son and I made him a silent promise. The debt was gone, but I wasn't going to let myself disappear anymore. Not as a father, not as a husband, not as the man they needed. And so as the silence stretched across the table, I knew this wasn't the end of our story. It was the moment I had to face the truth, to turn back through the years and remember how we even got here. Because before the healing, before the forgiveness, there was humiliation, there was separation, there was downfall, and it all started with one phone call. It began with a phone call. A normal evening, the house buzzing with chatter, cousins running around, the clatter of dishes, and laughter spilling across the table. For a moment, life felt almost ordinary. Then my phone rang. At first, I thought about ignoring it. But the number flashed again, persistent, insistent, and I knew I couldn't. I stepped away from the table, lifted it to my ear, and within seconds, the world I'd been holding together with fragile thread came crashing down. The voice was cold, sharp, almost mechanical. A debt collector. They didn't care that it was dinner time, that my family was listening, that my son's eyes were on me from across the room. They spoke loud, deliberately, loud, every word meant to cut. "Adam Stone, you are late on your payment again. If this continues, we'll have no choice but to take legal action." The words echoed, and though I tried to step into the hallway, the damage was already done. Conversations at the table faltered. Heads turned. My wife froze fork mid-air. My brother arched a brow, suspicion darkening his face. I whispered back, desperate, "Not now. I'll call tomorrow. Please," but it didn't matter. The voice kept going, listing numbers, amounts, deadlines. Each syllable another nail in the coffin of my pride. I could feel heat rising to my face, shame burning in my chest. I wasn't just being scolded, I was being exposed, stripped bare in front of everyone I cared about. By the time I ended the call, the room was silent. My wife's eyes pierced me, hurt, confused, maybe even betrayed. My brother leaned back in his chair, shaking his head, and my son just looked small, like the ground had shifted beneath him. I forced a laugh, a pathetic attempt to ease the tension. Just business stuff, nothing serious. But no one believed me. That night, after the guests had gone, the arguments began. Questions fired at me from every direction. Why hadn't I told them? How long had this been going on? How bad was it really? And I had no answers. Or maybe I had them, but saying them out loud would make it real. So I stayed quiet. Silence became its own confession. From that moment, the shadow of debt no longer hid in the background. It stood right there in the center of our lives, staring at us every time we sat at the table. And for the first time I realized this wasn't just my burden anymore. It was theirs too. After that night, nothing was the same. The silence in our house wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, thick, full of questions no one wanted to ask. But eventually the questions came. "How much do we owe Adam?" my wife whispered one night, her voice trembling. I stared at the floor. I wanted to lie to soften the truth, but my silence told her everything. The next morning the arguments began, her voice sharp, breaking between anger and disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me? How could you let it get this bad?" I tried to explain that I wanted to protect them, that I thought I could handle it on my own. But the more I spoke, the more her eyes filled with something I'd never seen before: betrayal. My brother came over a few days later. He slammed the table with his fist, demanding answers. "You've dragged us all into this mess. You think you're the only one paying the price. We all carry your shame now." Every word hit like a hammer. The house split in two. My wife stopped speaking to me, retreating into silence that was louder than any argument. My brother refused to visit, claiming he needed space. Even my son, my own boy, avoided my gaze as if he was afraid of what he might see. Nights grew longer, meals shorter. The laughter that once lived in our home had packed its bags and left. I walked through the halls like a stranger, and deep inside I knew something had broken. We weren't just fighting debt anymore, we were fighting each other. It felt like the walls of our family were cracking, and if I didn't do something soon, there'd be nothing left to save. The debt didn't just drain my bank account, it drained me. I sold the watch my father left me. I sold the guitar I used to play for my son at bedtime. Piece by piece, I traded memories for money. I worked days, nights, weekends, extra shifts, side jobs, anything. I fixed cars in a freezing garage, carried boxes until my back screamed, washed dishes until my hands cracked. Every dollar went straight into the abyss. But the harder I pushed, the more it took from me. I missed my son's soccer game, his school play, even his 12th birthday. Each time I told myself, next time I'll be there. But next time never came. My wife stopped waiting up for me. She would leave my dinner covered in foil on the counter, untouched by the time I got home. Sometimes she didn't even leave that. The silence between us grew so wide, I wondered if I'd ever cross it again. At work, I turned down promotions, afraid of the extra responsibility, afraid someone might find out how fragile I really was. Friends stopped calling. They didn't know what to say anymore, and honestly, neither did I. Nights were the worst. I'd sit at the kitchen table, papers spread around me, the numbers blurring into one another. Interest rates, overdue notices, red stamps. My chest would tighten, my hands trembling, as if I was holding up the weight of the whole house. Sometimes I thought about giving up, just walking away. But every time that thought came, I saw my son's face, my wife's eyes, my brother's disappointment. So I kept going. I pushed myself past exhaustion, past reason, past the man I used to be. And yet no matter how hard I fought, the debt never seemed smaller. It felt alive, like a beast that grew hungrier the more I fed it. The truth was, I wasn't just losing money, I was losing myself. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind of rain that doesn't roar, just falls soft and steady like the world is whispering its sadness. I sat at the kitchen table, bills spread in front of me again, the same red letters glaring back. My head rested in my hands. My eyes burned, but I hadn't cried in years. I was too tired for tears. That's when I heard it, a soft knock on the doorframe. I looked up, and there he was, my son, standing in the doorway, his hair damp from the rain, clutching a folded piece of paper in his hand. He didn't say a word at first. He just walked over, slid the paper onto the table, and sat beside me. His shoulder brushed mine, warm, steady. I opened the paper, and in his crooked, messy handwriting it said, "Dad, I don't need you to be a hero. I just need you here." The words blurred as my vision swelled. For a second I couldn't breathe. I turned to him, my throat closing, and for the first time in so long I let it all go. The tears came hot and relentless, pouring down my face. I pulled him close and he didn't pull away. He wrapped his arms around me, small but strong, and I felt something inside me break and heal all at once. In that embrace, I realized everything I had gotten wrong. I thought being a father meant shielding them from every storm, carrying every weight no matter how heavy. But my son, he didn't need a superhero. He needed a dad, a man who showed up, even broken, even flawed. That moment lit something inside me, a light I thought had burned out forever. The debt was still there. The fights, the silence, the shame, none of it had vanished. But sitting beside my boy, I felt a strength I hadn't known in years. Not the strength to carry it all alone, but the strength to rebuild together. I kissed the top of his head and whispered, "I'm here, son. I promise. I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time, I actually believed it. The next morning felt different. The rain had stopped. The air smelled cleaner, lighter. And though the debt was still there, though the cracks in my marriage still showed, something inside me had shifted. I started small. A notebook on the counter, a pen. I wrote down every expense, every dollar, every cent. For the first time, I wasn't just trying to survive, I was building a plan. At dinner, I asked my wife to sit with me. Her arms were folded, her eyes wary, but she listened. I showed her the notebook, the numbers, the steps I wanted to take. My voice shook, but I told her the truth, everything. No more secrets. She didn't say much that night, but she didn't walk away either, and that was enough. I asked my son to help me with the grocery list. He lit up, proud to be part of something bigger. Together we crossed out the snacks, the extras, the little luxuries we couldn't afford. He didn't complain, he smiled, as if cutting things down was a kind of game we could win. Slowly, routines began to change. We ate at the table again, not in silence, but with small conversations. I started coming home earlier, even if it meant one less overtime shift. We made Sunday dinners sacred. No work, no bills, just us. I reached out for help too, something I'd never done before. I spoke to a financial counselor, a man who didn't judge me, who gave me tools I didn't know I needed. He taught me how to prioritize, how to fight smarter, not just harder. The changes weren't dramatic. We were still broke, still behind, but it felt different. For the first time, I wasn't dragging my family through the mud they were walking with me. One night, as I tucked my son into bed, he whispered, "You're home more now." And I realized that's what he'd wanted all along. Not a perfect father, not a wealthy one, just one who showed up. Rebuilding wasn't about money. It was about trust, about piecing back together the family I had almost lost. And step by step, brick by brick, that's exactly what we began to do. It didn't happen overnight. Healing never does. At first, it was just small cracks in the silence. A word here, a glance there. My wife asking if I wanted more coffee. Me asking about her day. Simple, ordinary things, but after months of walls and distance, they felt like miracles. One evening I found her in the kitchen washing dishes. I hesitated, then walked over and picked up a towel. She didn't say anything, just passed me a plate. Our hands brushed. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, and whispered, "I was so angry, Adam, but I never stopped wanting you here." Those words nearly broke me. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, and said the only thing I could: "I'm sorry for all of it." That night, for the first time in years, we sat side by side on the couch. No shouting, no silence thick as stone, just the sound of the TV playing softly in the background, her head resting on my shoulder. My brother came around again, too. At first he stayed cold distant, but slowly he softened. He saw the changes, saw the effort. One night after dinner he clapped me on the back and said, "You're finally starting to get it. It's not about the debt. It's about us." Even my son changed. He laughed more. He asked me to help with his homework, to play catch in the yard. Every time I said yes, every time I showed up, I saw his eyes light up like they used to. The house began to sound alive again. Laughter creeping back in arguments, shrinking into simple disagreements, dinners stretching longer because no one wanted to leave the table. The debt was still heavy, but it didn't crush us anymore. Instead, it pushed us closer, forced us to lean on each other, to talk, to forgive. And somewhere along the way, the anger faded, the resentment eased. What was left wasn't perfect, but it was real. Stronger somehow because of the scars. Healing, I realized, wasn't about pretending the cracks never existed. It was about learning to live with them, to see beauty in the broken places. And for the first time in a long time, our family felt whole again. The night we made the final payment, I thought it would feel like victory. But it didn't. It felt like standing in the quiet after a storm, the air still heavy with rain, the ground littered with broken branches. The receipt sat in the middle of the table, proof that the shadow was gone. My hands trembled as I slid it across, and for a moment the room went silent, just like that night years before when the debt had first been exposed. But this time, something was different. My wife reached for my hand. No hesitation, no coldness, just warmth. She smiled, small, tired, but real. My brother raised his glass, his eyes softer than I'd seen in years. "And my son—" He leaned against my shoulder, no longer the boy who once begged for his father to stay, but a young man who knew his father finally had. We didn't cheer, we didn't shout, we didn't need to. Instead, we ate together, we laughed softly, and we lingered at the table long after the plates were empty. For once there was no rush, no weight pressing down on us. Just the quiet comfort of being together. I looked around that table at the people I almost lost, and I realized something. The debt wasn't the enemy, not really. The real enemy was the silence, the shame, the way I had shut them out. And now, with the shadow gone, all that remained was us, bruised, scarred, but stronger. I raised my glass, my voice low but steady. "To family," I said. And in that moment I wasn't the man who carried a burden too heavy or the man who had failed. I was simply a husband, a brother, a father. And somehow that was more than enough.